the more formal aspect, being the approval of the minutes, as well as the more informal aspects, talking about the groundbreaking and so on. But because the real sort of meat of the agenda is pretty important, the update on the permitting and the impact of the permitting delay on the project, I think it might make sense for us to jump right into that. And then at the end, we can come back to the approval of minutes and reflections on the groundbreaking. Does that make sense to everyone? All right. So with that, then I think I'm going to turn it over to, is it Lisa or Mark? That's going to be leading the discussion on this aspect.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. I think Lisa's going to lead us through a lot of the details and when we say details, and there's a lot of dense material and getting into a lot of it. I don't think we're going to go through every aspect of it, but to give folks an understanding of the context of where we are right now with the permitting, some of it's important. So, Lisa?
Excellent. Can everyone hear me? All right, great. So good evening and good to see everyone again. We're going to take folks through the permitting timeline. Javier, I think we want to save the groundbreaking until Chair Figueroa is with us. Is that correct? Okay. So I will advance past a couple slides here and have her speak to those when she gets here. So what we want to do is walk you through the timeline of the permitting process and where we're at in that process. And then we will go into the impacts of not having both of our permits at this time. Just for context, some background on the Reiche project and that timeline for permitting, which was really how the schedule was built, was based on the duration it took to acquire that permit or permits. Reiche we applied for on June 23rd, and that was for the building permit itself. We received comments on July 15th, responded on the 18th, and had our permit on the 23rd. While we were waiting for that permit in order to get the contractor started, we requested a demo permit so they could start to do non-structural demo inside the building. That was applied for on June 26th and received on June 28th, and we did not need a permit for relocating that portable. So that said, we'll go into the Reiche project. Reiche required two permits, one for the new portables on site and one for the building. The Reiche permit for the portables, that was applied for on June 30th. We had city meetings, which are the project management, permit management meeting with them on July 20th. And received email comments from the reviewer on July 12th, which were responded to on the 16th, clarifying some questions they had on the permit application. We received the actual official comments, and they have a thing that's called a portal, which is where they upload comments to on the 21st, which we had responded to already, and we received our permit on July 22nd for the portables. And for those who may not have been on site recently, those portables are up, being used, and we're ready for the start of school. The Reiche building permit, before I jump in this, I'll pause there to see if anybody has any questions on the information shared so far. Okay, not seeing any. The Reiche building permit, that was applied for on June 29th. We've had a series of meetings with the city, the project management meeting. There was a meeting with our code. We use a third-party code consultant, and there was a meeting with he and the city as there was a difference of interpretation of the code, and ultimately there's a couple meetings on that, and we requested to modify our approach to the firewall at the admin edition. And then there was there was a meeting in early August to review their permit comments and be able to discuss some of the questions that we had. And then there was a meeting on site August 11th, and this was to talk about the phase 1 construction work. In a occupied phase renovation, there are different phases, and information is submitted to show that each phase, the construction is separated from the occupants, and we have provided adequate egress from the building. So we were going over that phase 1 work with them on site to clarify that and hopefully be able to start some of that work to be able to start to separate phase 1 from the students before they return for school. We also had a meeting on September 30th. This meeting there's some back and forth on our approach to the firewall, and they wanted to reach out to the state fire marshal to get an interpretation. On September 30th, they informed us that they had not heard from or they're still communicating with the state fire marshal on the interpretation on the firewall. And the city indicated that the city building official made the determination that they would no longer require it, and that it wasn't needed for the separation of the 800 square foot addition. So that item had been resolved. Then this next section gets into kind of the correspondence back and forth on comments and clarifications after we submitted. There was some back and forth on the naming of the permit set. We had submitted the same set that we submitted to the state fire marshal because we have to get an ADA permit from them as well. That was not accepted as a correct name. They wanted to say construction set. Ultimately, we have a conformance set at the end of a bidding period so that you have all the addenda in there and it's easier to work with one set. That was ultimately accepted as an acceptable name on the drawings. So that's what these next slide is about, the back and forth around that. And then we received comments on July 29th. Those comments were around fixture count. They wanted us to clarify some of the occupant loads and egress. And so what that is number of people the building's designed for, and the egress capacity, which is the number of people that we've designed to be able to get out of the building. Wanted some additional information on the kiln. Wanted some clarification on some of the spaces and how they're being used, and some clarification on our approach to the firewall I mentioned earlier. We responded on August 6th, addressing those comments. And then we received additional comments on August 10th and 11th, and essentially asking us to resubmit. And a lot of this was the back and forth around the firewall. And we responded on the 13th about our approach, and received comments on the 13th. They were not agreeing with our approach. And so it was back and forth for some time up until August 30th. I'm sorry, September 30th on that conversation. And then ultimately the determination was made by the city. It was no longer needed. And the, let's see, jumping around here, but we had a bunch of back and forth, as I said. On September 6th, they wanted us to clarify some information about the plaza, which is what we're referring to on that is where the old ramp used to be that went up over the building, that outdoor space on the second floor. That was clarified. We requested a foundation permit on the 15th because at this point we were getting concerned about winter conditions. And at this point, we had not resolved the firewall. We're told that we could not apply for a foundation permit because that was the area to which was in question, which is where we were asking for the foundation permit. So that was not something that we could do. We got comments back on the 15th and still about the about the firewall. And the 21st, the school district reached out to see if there's any update on that firewall. And so these next two rows are still talking about that. And then the 30th is when we had that meeting about the firewall that ultimately got resolved. We submitted a response back to the city outlining how we are addressing all of the comments they'd given us to date, and that we were removing any reference to the firewall for the request. We received comments back on October 4th, and the question came up about toilet fixture counts and a difference in interpretation on those. And the other one was around an interpretation on the atrium. And then some clarifications on roof protection for mechanical equipment, and a couple questions about the chase walls and some blocking. We had addressed all those questions and have sent one item up to the state. Ultimately, the question that came up around the state plumbing code, or not the state plumbing code, around the fixture count was that they weren't agreeing with our approach of determining an occupants. And that has been something that we have worked with the state plumbing inspector in the past to determine that the number is calculated based on the way the school is used, and it's a classroom count, therefore providing the fixture count for the occupants of the building. So we made a determination in that meeting with the city that we would go to the state to get a clarification on that, and we have been back and forth with the state as well as the city, and think that will be essentially determined at the beginning of next week. So that is the one remaining item at this point, is the determination on the fixture count, so we can resubmit all the drawings back and agree to how they have been, hopefully agree to how they have been addressed.
Have you confirmed that that's the only thing that is outstanding, Lisa?
Yeah, that's a great question.
And the fall protection.
So what we did is we sent a draft letter back to them outlining our approach on all of this. And you're right, they didn't say, yes, we agree with all of these. They pretty much said we need that fixture count resolved before we can re-review the set. So I can't say that we have it in writing that they agree with all of those. We have provided a response and approach to addressing all of those.
Yeah.
Hey all, I'm so sorry to join late. I see that Lauren has her hand up as well. And again, my apologies. I had this on my schedule for 6:30 and did not double check. So sorry to join late. But Lauren, did you have a question?
Yes, I do. Did you request a foundation permit after you resolved the firewall concern?
That's a good question, Laura. We had not requested a foundation permit after that was resolved on September 30th.
Why not?
There was a lot of resistance to providing us multiple permits. So I think we were hopeful that we would have had the toilet count resolved shortly thereafter. And so therefore that is why.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Superintendent Patana, you still have your hand up. Do you have other questions?
I don't have other questions. Thank you.
Go ahead, Lisa.
All right. I'm going to pass it over to Mark, who's going to go through the impact of the project.
So question is, what does a delay in getting the permits do to the project? There's a couple things really. One, there's an impact to the operations of the school. And I don't know, Lisa, if we've got the next slide we can advance to here. One of the things is that there's a possibility that the extended construction duration, this is the last point on the slide, but the extended duration of the construction potentially would mean the use of the portables longer. And we certainly, at this point, we don't know what the full extent of the modified construction schedule will be. So we don't know what that impact will be to the use of the portables. With respect to the delay in the schedule, right now, the contractor expected to be able to utilize time that we're now not able to because we're waiting for the permit. They likely will need the full summer of 2023, and then possibly the fall of 2023. So that would extend it past what we originally anticipated, which was the opening of the fully renovated facility in the school year starting the fall of 2023. So it's a potential that we're going to be shifting that last phase further by one semester, if you will, into the fall of 2023. But and again, right now we don't know what the impact is yet until we get the permits, and then we can evaluate what the schedule will be with the contractor. Anytime there's a delay in the schedule, there are also other potential items, and also the review of the items that Lisa talked about by the city potentially have cost implications. And so right now, what we have shown as an approach to the existing atrium condition, the large opening in the library, right now we have identified a way to address it, which requires some enclosure of that opening. We haven't had that priced yet. We have developed the drawings, but we have not given it to the contractor for pricing, so we don't know what the impact of that is yet. But that will have a cost impact to the project beyond what was originally priced. And so those are some of the cost impacts. Like I said, there's also going to be a cost impact to the fact that the contractor wasn't able to start when they anticipated starting. The sort of aspect of, okay, what could have been done differently now that kind of we're at this point. And there's a couple things that, one is, what we could have done is likely pushed the bidding out further, right? So we were staggering our bids and allowing some time to get contractors on board while we were getting the permits. As Lisa said at the very beginning, we anticipated the permit timeframe would be similar to what was done at LICEF, a similar aspect of same regulatory body and we're doing in a similar scale to the project. So likely, had we known that it would have taken months, we likely would have put the bid period out further, and so the whole thing the schedule just sort of slid. The other, it says apply for permits 4 months before bid. That's essentially what we're meaning. So we would apply for the permit after we completed the documents, but wait 4 months to actually ask contractors to price it. And that would have meant a different construction schedule than than we originally were looking at. One consideration is to request a virtual meeting with the code enforcement officer prior to applying for the permits. Prior to COVID, there were regular meetings with the city that were held at City Hall, and they would bring multiple departments and provide an opportunity to walk through what the project is with various departments, including code enforcement and also the plan reviewers from the fire department, to get feedback. And so those don't happen in person the way they did. So the consideration is to have requested a virtual meeting with the CEO, code enforcement officer. The other consideration was that, as sort of last bullet points out, currently this is kind of a not necessarily could have been done differently, but right now the submittal process. Right now, we're currently prioritizing that and procurement, so that we can keep the contractors' work moving as efficiently as we possibly can, and so that will hopefully mean as soon as they get to work that they're ready to go, and they're not waiting for a review of the materials that they're using in the building or equipment that they're using, and so that can be purchased when it's ready, or when it has been reviewed long before we need it at the time of construction. So it may actually save a little bit in that regard of efficient process, but that's not one of the big differences. So I'll pause here for a minute if there are any questions on this point of it.
Lauren, go ahead, please.
I have a few questions. So when did you expect to get the building permit?
So as we identified from the LICEF permit process, it took 4 weeks to get the building permit from the time of submission. And so we had that as our plan to, within that time frame, 4 to 6 weeks from the time of submission is what we were planning on.
Okay, yeah, that's a really short amount of time. Like, when were they planning to get started?
The contractor was planning on getting started, mobilized just prior to us receiving the permit. And so the contractor, after we get contracts awarded from the bid opening, there was a short period of time, and they were hoping to get started this past summer. So.
Okay, and then I know I asked this previously, but then since you are not, like, why are you not requesting a foundation permit now? Because wouldn't you want to request that now so you could take advantage of putting a foundation in before the winter comes and get a start on that?
Yeah, I think the strategy of that, we can revisit certainly the impact that applying for that would allow the contractor to get moving. I think as Lisa pointed out, our thought process at the time that they rejected the possibility of moving forward with the foundation permit was that we were anticipating that the review of the full building permit would be fairly substantially progressed, and that the permit would be more imminent.
Okay, but since that's not the case and you don't have a date when you would get a permit, I mean, is there maybe multiple people can reach out? I mean, this affects the school, the children, the community. This has a cost increase. I mean, that's a huge thing.
Yeah,
and
so Lisa, you want to?
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
Lauren, we can reach out again and request. They have to approve us to be able to apply for the foundation permit.
I know. So I am an architect, so I do understand the process of that.
No, I'm just stating that for others as well, that they have to approve us to be able to apply for that, so we can make the request if that is something they'd be willing to do at this point. And we've requested demo permits before too, and we've been told they didn't want multiple permits. So we'll make the request again and see if that's now an option given the response to the trial, and see if we can at least shake things loose that way.
I mean, if that would help them get started, then that would seem like a good path.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Absolutely. So that's, I think we wanted to scroll back up. Oh, here we go. Sorry. I missed the slide, Mark. I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, this goes into further detail and in terms of what those cost impacts really are because of a delay in the schedule. So the contractor has what they call general conditions, and those are costs to manage and be on site to manage the construction and the subcontractors. And so that has a cost for the fact that they've mobilized to the job, and right now they're not able to utilize the workers that they have on site, the management staff, and they have other costs. And then we have subcontractor costs. So not only does the general contractor that's running the project have that, but then there are potential costs from subcontractors. There's the potential to have to accelerate the work once we do get the permit. And so that has a cost if there's off shift or work or weekend work that has to occur, then there's a premium to pay for that. As Lauren mentioned too, there are winter conditions, and so the idea that we're paying to temper spaces or conditions because building systems require certain parameters to install. For instance, concrete can't be poured in very, very cold temperatures, or it needs admixtures or warming blankets. Then there's right now, we simply don't know, as I mentioned earlier, we simply don't know what the full extent of the cost will be until we get the permit, and then we can work with the contractor to revise the schedule. And also, just in our previous DABC meeting, the owner's project manager, CHA representatives also just, they've been assisting, particularly in this aspect of looking at the impacts to the project. I don't know if Laura or Jeff want to speak on this point.
Sure. So we can chime in. We have looked at the overall impact to the three projects, each of them individually and kind of where they are with their scope, the general contractor's costs per month with their general conditions or their staff, and then the subcontractors that are affected, like you mentioned, the winter conditions, any premium time required to make up the schedule. So on Reiche, we have come up with an estimate of about $400,000. Altogether, for the three projects, we're looking at about $1.4 million right now. That's our estimate. Also included in that is some of the additional requests, like the atrium is. We've put an estimate, even though it's not formally priced yet. We've put an estimate on what we think that impact is going to be.
Javier?
Does the 400,000 include the atrium?
It does, yes.
Mm-hmm. And then where does that money come from?
Well, I think that that's a good question.
Yeah, I think the strategy that we're going to have to do is, before we expend money for other areas of the soft costs in the budget, we'll have to look carefully at what has been encumbered by the construction costs.
And how much is the contingency that currently is associated with the Reiche project? Is it enough to cover that?
Independent of any other changes, it would be, but we also want to be mindful of what the fact that there will be conditions as we go through the construction that will require changes. Don't have the numbers.
I guess, I mean, I know the answers to these questions. I guess what I'm trying to point out is the fact that there is enough money in the contingency to cover these expenses, but, you know, obviously using the contingency before you actually break ground, or I guess we've technically broken ground, is problematic.
Precisely, yeah.
And then I'll just add back in. I understand this conversation now about the foundation permit, but my understanding was that we had tried to get the foundation permit. I'm wrong in that.
Yeah, so we did, Emily. The conversation previously was we had requested it. We were denied the request because of the questions around the firewall. And then ultimately the city determined that they were no longer going to require the firewall. And so Lauren had asked, did we then apply for a foundation permit again after that? And so the response is we have not. We were, working towards closing out the fixture count and thought that was more imminent than it was. And so following up with Lauren's request, we'll reach back out to see if that is now an option for us or not.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Can I just be clear on that? So we did ask for the permit and we were denied, or we did not ask for the permit?
We did ask for it. We were denied because at the time, the area that was under review with the city was around the firewall, and the firewall essentially separate.
Right, but after the firewall situation was resolved.
We did not re-request one, no. That help clarify, Emily, your question?
It did. Thank you.
Okay.
I don't see any other questions or hands up.
Excuse me. I have a very small question compared to all of this, but it is a question for this team. Right now, because the way that the modulars work, we have students who need to come into the building to use bathrooms and access specials and things. And we've hired a building aide whose job is to stand at the door and open it for students as they want to come into the building, because we can't give them the code, and that's the only way to do it. I know at Presumpscot, when we had modulars, we had a fob that students could use to get themselves in and out of the building to use the bathroom. And I'm wondering if there is a process to put that in place in our building as part of this, or if that would go through Portland Public Schools as a work order.
Annie?
Yes.
Doug Sherwood. We have arranged through conversations with Mr. Hummel that we're looking at installing the similar AI phone device. They'll have an intercom and a camera, and this office will have a door release. So whenever anybody wants to get in that side entrance, it'll be there. The work is hopefully starting next week. We need to collaborate with you as to, what the best pathway from a schedule standpoint, and I can call you next week with, those particular details.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Doug. Mark and Lisa, I think we're good to go on.
I think we were going to circle back to the groundbreaking ceremony when you were here, Emily.
And approval of the minutes. We did not approve them.
Okay, excellent. So again, my apologies for getting the time of this meeting wrong. I'm really sorry. But let's go forward and consider our last meeting minutes. And I'm just gonna pull them up myself. So these are our meeting minutes from our August 26th meeting. And I hope that folks have had a chance to look at them. What I'll do is ask for a motion and a second, and then if there are any edits or changes, we can consider those. So is there a motion to approve the meeting minutes from our August 26th meeting? You could just say
so. Matt Peters.
Thank you, Matt Peters. Is there a second? Someone could just say, thank you, Annie. Seconded by Annie. Okay, are there any edits or changes or suggestions to the minutes? All right. If they're all good, if you can just, with a show of hands, indicate if you support approving the minutes. Terrific. So the minutes are approved. Thank you all. And now we'll go to the groundbreaking. Who is going to run us through that?
Emily, do you want to run it? Emily Fedor, do you want to?
Oh, sure. I would love to. So we held the groundbreaking last Thursday. Thank you so much to everyone who joined us and to the Reiche staff for and Harriman for all they did to coordinate it. We were joined by the second graders, and the second graders are in the modulars, as folks know, this year. So they're the kids who are currently most impacted by the renovation. And one highlight for me was the superintendent telling his second grade appropriate jokes. But overall, there was a number of us who spoke. Myself and the superintendent, and let's see, and Mr. Hummel. Mr. Hummel. And then the kids, as you can see from the pictures here, got their shovels and started digging. And I think it was quite a joyous event. We had some members of the public as well as many of the folks who are involved in the project. I thought it was a great celebration. Clearly a celebration during COVID, so we were limited in the number of students, but I think it was great to have everyone who was able to join us. And it was a very joyous event. So thank you. And maybe I should specifically thank Emily, because I know she did at Harriman. I know she did a lot to coordinate the event. So thank you so much, Emily, and to the Reiche lead teachers for all you did. We know it was a lot to add this to all you're doing, and I hope the second graders enjoyed it and found their way through the superintendent's jokes. And I don't know if I think that's it. Were we going to walk through the upcoming meeting schedule?
We'll circle down to
Lisa, you're breaking up for me. I don't know if that's my connection or your connection.
Okay. It might be my connection. Can you hear me okay now?
It's better now, yeah.
Okay. So upcoming meetings, our next DABC is on November 18th. BLACs are to be determined because of the Thanksgiving holiday. So we need to circle back and arrange a date for the next BLAC meetings for the end of November or beginning of December. And we have been through 3 of the 4 celebrations around the 4 BFOF projects. Reiche, as we said, had their groundbreaking on October 21st. Presumpscot was October 22nd. And today was Lyseth ribbon cutting. So the official ceremony for opening Lysa. Longfellow's groundbreaking will be tomorrow at 1 p.m. So we hope everyone can attend that and help that school celebrate their groundbreaking as well. And that is our presentation for this evening.
Excellent. So thank you so much, everyone. I think what I'll do is, we are hopeful that we'll get at least a conditional building permit early next week. Either the superintendent or I will circle back to this group when we do. So you all know that update. And then we'll be in touch about whether we're going to hold a November meeting. So does that sound good? Any other questions or feedback, or anything else that folks want to address tonight? All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us tonight. And we'll keep at it. We're going to get this project going. I'm optimistic. So I think it's been a long haul, but I think we're getting close. So thank you so much, everyone. I don't think we need a motion to end the meeting tonight. I think we can just go ahead and close, and appreciate everyone's time, and have a good night.